We have done it. I will be your Democratic nominee for the mayor of New York City.
Hello and welcome to this special edition, a crossover episode of NY1's Off Topic on Politics and You Decide podcast. This is a little bit after 1 in the morning, 12:58 in the morning as of this point. We've been on set all night talking about this primary election, monumental news in the race for mayor, the end of a political dynasty, and Zohran Mamdani is all but set to become the Democratic nominee in this race. Up until a few weeks ago, we thought that this was never going to happen, that Andrew Cuomo was the inevitable potential next mayor of New York City. But lo and behold, tonight's results say the opposite. Bobby Cuza, you were at the big board all night. Can you just give us a rundown of where things stand?
Sure. I mean, I feel like we were dishonest with our viewers. We told them that we weren't going to know the outcome of the race tonight because, well, first of all, you have to get more than 50% of the vote to win the race outright and avoid ranked choice voting. We were right that nobody got 50% of the vote, but I think we all had a pretty good idea that Andrew Cuomo was probably going to be the one in the lead at the end of the night, and then that this was then going to go to ranked choice tabulation next week, and maybe Mamdani would overtake him, right? I mean, that's kind of where we all thought things were going. Instead, I'm looking at the numbers, and Zohran Mamdani with 43.5% of the vote, that is 7 points better than Andrew Cuomo. So he finishes 7 points ahead of Andrew Cuomo. There's no way Andrew Cuomo's coming from behind. And so the race is over. I mean, the race was over tonight. Andrew Cuomo effectively conceded. Mamdani gave his acceptance speech, which I'm not clear he had written ahead of time.
Because we were waiting for a long time.
We were waiting for a long time.
I saw a teleprompter there. I think, yes, they were probably keying it in. Yes.
And I mean, whether or not he'd written it, I mean, he clearly meant for it to be a speech to be remembered. Right. This was not just a perfunctory thank you to the volunteers in the campaign and, some kind of spontaneous off the cuff remarks. This was something where he really wanted to make a statement because he knew the world was watching.
It's the international audiences at this point. I mean, a Democratic Socialist is the potential Democratic nominee. And I just want to say potential because we do need the ranked choice voting tabulation. So I realize that it's pretty much inevitable that he's the Democratic nominee, but the math is...
This is more akin to every other election we've done where and there's a concession and there's a victory speech, and then we wait another week for absentee ballots, for mail-in ballots. Yeah. This is effectively that. And it'll be mail-in ballots plus a ranked choice voting tabulation, just to confirm what everyone, including Andrew Cuomo, already knew, which is that this is going to be the Democratic nominee.
So how did he do it? Silence.
There are a lot of different factors, but just off the top of my head, if I could just pick two that I think are really salient. One is that the Cuomo campaign did not have a field organization, which, as incredible as it may sound, they had millions of dollars, they had decades of experience. They know how these things are done, and they chose not to do those things. They chose not to ever talk to you for your podcast or me for my podcast. They chose not to put out a schedule that showed them really going around and engaging with people. They were playing hide and seek, and they weren't knocking on doors. They weren't putting people out in the street to remind people to vote.
They didn't think they needed to.
They didn't think they needed to. So
up until a week ago, he was the inevitable nominee. I mean, there was polling. Marist even last week had him ahead by a significant amount of points. It wasn't until this week Emerson College put out a poll showing that Mamdani could potentially win in ranked choice voting.
And look, there were a lot of signs along the way that there were some problems here. But the two things, again, just to make the point, is one is they had no field operation, and two, they were the incumbent. They were basically the incumbent. And when you're the incumbent and people are telling the pollsters 70 to 77% think that the city's going in the wrong direction, the incumbent is the one that's going to get blamed. When there's an incumbent, especially an unpopular incumbent, when there are undecided voters, generally they break in the direction of the challenger, not the incumbent. And although he was never elected mayor, Andrew Cuomo, having been governor for more than 10 years, was basically the incumbent. And then he pounded home the very same message, saying like, I'm the guy with experience. I'm the incumbent. I'm the guy. I'm the establishment. I'm what you know. And the voters were looking for something completely different.
Yeah, they wanted a change candidate, and Andrew Cuomo was not the change candidate.
He's a lot of things, but he's not the change candidate.
But I mean, you can't say that we didn't see this coming, because we all saw it. We all saw it coming. I mean, over the past few months, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I kept citing the polling from Emerson, because they do a poll every month, or roughly every month. And in February, Mamdani had 1%. 1%. Yeah. He was, I forget the numbers now, he was down by like 32 points to Andrew Cuomo. But every month, it got closer and closer and closer. And we all saw when the first hint that I got of what was happening was when we saw the first fundraising numbers. And I don't even remember how far back that was, but
March.
Right from the jump, Mamdani was outraising everybody.
16,000 individual donations.
More.
Everybody.
Now it's close to 20K.
And it wasn't because he was getting a ton of media attention, right? We weren't giving him a ton of media. This was like for real grassroots interest in the campaign. And so, you know, you could see the wave building over time, but I think we didn't believe it was actually going to make it to shore, right? We thought it was going to maybe fall short. And then in the last few days, we were like, oh, well, maybe he really can do it. But instead, you know, he just swamped Cuomo. And the trajectory, I think, was even steeper than we were expecting.
I think we also need to give a lot of credit to his message. Andrew Cuomo was running a campaign of 2021, of fear-mongering, of, you know, about public safety. It was very similar to the message that Eric Adams had, which was victorious in 2021, but it was a backward-looking message, not a forward-looking message. And Mamdani and his supporters would tell you is that he offered some sort of vision of hope that was concise and simple. And we talked about this on the podcast, Bobby, how many times, is that you knew what Zohran Mamdani was running on. It's quite simple. Like,
Free
freeze
buses,
the rent, give me a free bus. Yeah, you know, we could all recite it. We all probably all recite it in our sleep, right? Like, it doesn't even matter if it's logistically possible or palatable to the, you know, the powers that be in Albany, because they clearly have a say over whether or not you can finance all these kinds of programs. It was simple, cohesive, and people knew what he stood for. Right.
And so, you know, here we are with a candidate who did all of the right things, raised the most money, or raised a lot of money very quickly, had a simple, concise message, and yet he was attacked as some kind of crazy foreign presence who had to be driven out of New York politics, which is very different. I mean, you know, it's one thing to try and defeat somebody. It's another thing to try and disqualify them. And he basically, the messaging from the Cuomo campaign, from the super PAC that was supporting Cuomo, from the New York Times editorial board was just, you know, not just we don't like his ideas, or not just he's not ready even. They were just saying
he's dangerous.
He cannot be a part of
this. He's dangerous, right? That was the argument. I mean, that was, I think, Cuomo might have even used that language in one of the debates where it's reckless and
dangerous. That's right.
To have
and the mailers from Fix the City, that super PAC we've been talking about, that was supporting Andrew Cuomo, raised more than $25 million, more than any other super PAC in New York City municipal mayor history. Spent, at least when I was checking this afternoon, because they update the numbers every 24 hours, spent more than $20 million. Wow. Bloomberg donated $8.3 million to it. And this is like Bloomberg level money, right? Remember when he spent $100 million on his race? Well, it didn't matter. That $20 million didn't matter.
And that was all, I mean, most of that was spent just in the last few weeks, right?
So they started going negative June 12th, the day of our debate. It was positive about Andrew Cuomo, what a great leader he would be, that he's stable, that he's going to hire more cops, that there's not going to be mentally ill people on the subway anymore. And then boom, our debate hit. They clearly saw in the numbers something shifting. Fix the City and Andrew Cuomo, and then they started going so negative on Mamdani to the point where they were darkening and lengthening his beards and some of these, you know, things that they were allegedly going to send out.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because the other big factor that I guess they detected it too late and didn't have an answer to it is that there is something of a realignment going on, that there are new groups. You know, we've been paying special attention to South Asian voters, the Muslim Democratic Club, of which Zohran Mamdani used to be a board member. His lawyer is part of that organization, one of the co-founders of it. There are real numbers in that community. There's real political activity coming out of that community. They want to be heard. They insist on being heard. They're not going to be ignored anymore. And here's a number that I found really striking. you may remember from the debate, I asked Andrew Cuomo, why in more than 10 years as governor did you never visit a mosque? And he gave some sort of mealy-mouthed answer where he said, well, I don't know if that's true, but I can't quite remember if I ever went, and I'll get back to you, and we never got back to it. So there's that. And then Mamdani's people were telling me today that in the last week, they visited, I have the number, 135 mosques.
Wow.
You know, so it's kind of like if you're ignoring a community, the community wants to be heard, the community is growing, and the community is getting politically activated, things like this will happen.
It'll be really interesting to see the demographic numbers. I mean, we were looking at it a little bit on set when we were live all night long, and we waited for so long for Zohran Mamdani to speak. And I feel like partly we waited because the Attorney General was there, Brad Lander was there. All of a sudden, you know, the people that had backed his candidacy, whether they were ranking him number one or number two, descended upon this election night party talking about unity. But I digress. Now I lost my train of thought because it's 1 something in the morning.
Well, you're talking about demographics.
Oh, that's what it was.
And
we were looking at the borough by borough analysis. Is like he was winning Brooklyn, he was winning Queens, he was winning Manhattan, he was winning certain parts of Manhattan, you know, with a lot of black voters that I was not anticipating him winning, right?
We're winning them 2-1.
Yeah, because Andrew Cuomo was the guy who was like, what's his base? You know, black voters.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to take a look at some of the more Jewish Orthodox neighborhoods, like how those ended up breaking down.
Right. Yeah. Those. It seems like those. I haven't looked that closely at myself, but I think those neighborhoods maybe didn't go as overwhelmingly for Cuomo as we thought they would. Places like West Harlem and Washington Heights, I think, were areas where Mamdani did better than we expected. And Errol, as you're talking about realignment, you got me thinking too. Like looking at the numbers, we knew that Mamdani was doing well with young voters, with well-educated voters, with voters who had higher income, with white voters. And so there was this thinking like, is there a ceiling, right? Like once you count all the votes from, you know, wealthy, white, educated people in Astoria, like, is there going to be enough? And Brooklyn, is there going to be enough left? But it turned out that Cuomo was the one with the ceiling.
Well, exactly right. Exactly right. I mean, this goes back to the politics and frankly, the political coalition of the past versus the future, right? So he made a point of jumping out there with, you know, the Teamsters Union, with the building trades, the Carpenters Union is where he had his headquarters and where he launched his campaign. But a lot of those folks are suburban at this point. You know, the white working class that made up the union backbone that he wanted to sort of use as his political base, they're not as numerous. They're not nearly as young. A lot of them are at retirement age. A lot of them have left the city already. They certainly weren't out in force the way the kids are that supported Zohran Mamdani. So you check almost every box of how do you put together something that might look strong or might have looked strong 20 years ago, 30 years ago, but at this point is kind of like an empty shell. And that's really what he was working with. And
record turnout, potentially. We shouldn't say, there's definitely more turnout than what was happening in 2021. There was 940 some odd thousand who turned out in 2021 for that mayoral primary. And the last I looked was around 990,000. So it'll be very crucial to see if they end up breaking 1 million votes. And are those new voters who have never come out and vote before? Gothamist and Bridget Bergen at WNYC did this, you know, great analysis showing that of the early votes that were in, which was close to 400,000, 25% of those early voters had never voted before.
Right.
That's an astounding number
low
of new
propensity voters. Yeah, that is huge.
So just like Donald Trump is speaking to a certain type of, you know, white working class voter, Mamdani is speaking to a different type of voter coming out for the same time, most likely young, highly educated, and white. I mean, this is a nationally recognized, internationally watched race in which some people are going to think, well, is this the direction of the Democratic Party and the way in which it should be going?
I mean, here again, going back to realignment, right? I mean, you might want to think that there are lunch pail, you know, guys who have no further than a high school diploma who are in huge numbers all across the 5 boroughs waiting to vote. That might have been true in the 1950s or the 60s, but you know, at this point, you've got an entirely different electorate that's emerging. I heard one real estate broker refer to them, and I think this is part of what we're seeing here in the demographic, as what he calls Henrys. Highly educated, not rich yet. Right? So we've got all of these Henrys. We've got all of these people who have landed here the way I did when I got out of college. I got out of college. I got here in the 19. I show up at the start of the crack epidemic, and I have a fancy Harvard degree. And I have a driver's license, and I was like,
Broke.
all I need is
nothing.
All I need is a computer and a press pass, and I will take over New York journalism.
You did. Look at you.
Yeah, it only took 40 years. Couldn't get a loan. Couldn't get to first base. Couldn't get anywhere. I was working for $150 a week. If I wasn't living in a crack-infested neighborhood in a building that my father owned, and he gave me the keys because literally nobody else wanted to be there. And I swept the crack files literally off the stairs and made it my home. But those opportunities are not around now, where people are doubling and tripling up in an apartment that costs $4,000 a month, right?
Amazing.
So there's this underlying betrayal of the New York dream, or our version of the American dream. And Zohran Mamdani was like right there to say, and he said it in his victory speech, saying like, if you've been here waiting for your life to get started, I am here for you, and I'll do whatever I can to help you get launched. And, that's apparently a winning message.
Yeah. And that is all true. But I would also say the other candidates in the race also tried to zero in on that message, right? They were all talking about affordability. I mean, affordable housing was probably the one issue I heard candidates talk most about in this race, but it wasn't just that, right? I mean, he had the right message.
Yes.
And that is all right, but also he was the right messenger.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that people are going to be watching this primary. We'll see if they end up taking this message nationally. I mean, already the NRCC is going out, putting some vulnerable congressional members in pictures next to Zohran Mamdani.
Next to the scary socialist.
Scary socialist.
I mean, I would only caution those people, and including Eric Adams, by the way. We just saw you couldn't throw in this period of time more money at this than Andrew Cuomo did. Mm-hmm. You couldn't find somebody who had a more, impressive track record of accomplishments and political experience. I mean, Andrew Cuomo, let's keep in mind, he won not one, not two, he won 7 statewide elections. 3 as the campaign manager for his father as governor, 1 on his own as attorney general, and then 3 as governor.
Yeah.
This is somebody who really, really knows politics. He decided, I know what, I'll demonize Zohran Mamdani, and he got his clock cleaned. So, the NRCC, whatever you guys want to do, good luck. But I don't know if that message is going to sell.
All right. On to November, and we will talk about it a lot in the coming weeks and months, but that's going to have to do it for tonight's special episode of You Decide and New York One's Off Topic on Politics. Remember, you can always watch us on Inside City Hall Monday through Friday at 7, and we love your feedback. Send us an email at yourstoryNewYork1@charter.com. You can subscribe to both of these podcasts wherever you get your podcasts, and we're on YouTube, so make sure you subscribe on YouTube and watch us there as well. Thanks to our producer, Anthony Roman, for staying up late with us. We appreciate it. And we'll see you all later on this week.